Hello, hello, hello. Can everybody hear me? What's up, people? Here we go. Cameras on. Have you got cameras on, guys? What's up, Alina? There we go. Alina's ready. She's ready. She's got the camera on. I know Nuna's going to be ready because I just jumped off a one-on-one with her. You can all blame Nuna for me being late to the call, by the way, guys, just in case you wanted to blame somebody. She was taking up all of my attention. There we go. Got some more people joining. Alina, you don't need to say out loud. You can nod or anything like that if you've got noise going on. Is this the first call you guys have been on, or have you been on one before? First one? Beautiful. Okay. Well, I've got some first impressions to be making to you guys. Savonia already knows what's up. She had some fun last week. Cara, I believe this might be your first one as well. If you can hear me, feel free to just type one in the chat. For anybody that doesn't know me, and this is going towards Cara and Alina, and you have no idea who this random guy with a British accent is on your screen today. Yes, first one. Awesome. Um, I am, well, Nuna can speak for me. I'm a closer. I've been closing high ticket for the past 3.5, almost 4 years. I was in retail sales before that. So I'm the stereotypical high ticket sales success story, given that I was a broke high school dropout that wouldn't listen to anybody. And now I travel the world and do rich people things every now and then. So it's good fun. But I am still closing, so I'm not your standard kind of BS guru. I still make money closing, but of course I'm trying my best to become a BS guru with your guys' help at some point. But in all seriousness, today, guys, I wanted to talk about the only two jobs that we should really have on a sales call. Oh, look, Nuna's flexing with her outside view. Check that out. I like it, guys. I wanted to talk today about stopping you guys from overcomplicating your sales process. Because I feel like a lot of times nowadays, with the amount of trainings, with the amount of those guru bastards out there, that I'm trying to become, it's very easy for us to feel like we need to have like this crazy skill set and this crazy ability to just uncover all of these different topics on a sales call. And even though it's not easy to run a sales call, it can be quite goddamn simple. So I think with a lot of the content that I've been seeing out there, I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to see the process for exactly what it is, instead of just trying to overcomplicate it for no reason. So if anybody is willing to unmute, and if you don't, I am going to be the dickhead teacher that's going to call on people. So depending on how you guys want this to go, who can tell me what is at least just one of the jobs that we've got to do on a sales call? What's at least just one job? And there's no right or wrong answer here, guys. You could give me the stupidest answer. I promise I won't laugh at you. The rest of the group might, but I won't. What's like the one thing that comes to mind that is an absolute must that we've got to do on a sales call? Either unmute or post it in the chat itself.
We have to see if they have a problem that we can actually solve.
Boom. That's a big one. Identifying the problem. Help them make a confident decision. Damn right. Go on, somebody give me one more. What's another job? One more. Before I call on somebody. 3, 2, 1. Nuna, seeing as you were the reason why I was late to this call, give me one other job that people have on a sales
Their
call.
goals and their dreams.
Help them identify their goals and the dreams, the desired outcome. All very, very extremely valid answers, guys, and none of them are wrong. I think the framework that might help you guys from now on is understanding that, in my opinion, and Nuna knows I'm always open to a debate, so please disagree with me if you guys want to. I'll try my best to prove myself right. I personally believe there's still only two jobs that any sales rep has on a sales call. Only two. One of them is confirm you can actually help this person. Okay. Confirm they're a good fit, right? As Savonia said, identifying they actually have a problem. They have a pain. They have something that allows us to come in and fix for them. That's the obvious one. Now, the other job, which is the one that takes up the vast majority of our time on a sales call, is to eliminate all possible objections before we get to the point where we're trying to close somebody. Like, genuinely. I know it sounds maybe overly simplified. It won't once we get into like towards the end of today's call. Hopefully it makes a bit more sense to you guys. Otherwise, I've not done a very good fucking job, have I? But no, honestly, like identifying you can help the person. Our job is not to sell, it's to diagnose at the end of the day. And then it's making sure that we can identify all of the possible objections that this person can have and doing our job to handle them before we get to the close. Okay. All making sense so far? Either give me a nod, thumbs up, or type a 1 or a thumbs up in the chat. All good? There we go. Thumbs up from Nuna, head nod from Alina. Boom. Thumbs up from Cara. I like it. So we'll talk about both jobs. I want to start with job number 1 because it's the simplest one. It's the easiest one for us to make sure that we're getting taken care of, is confirming that we can actually help this person. As I said, our job is not to sell. It's genuinely to diagnose. Like, you guys need to get the idea of, just because your title is sales rep, you know, you're not here to sell. The best sales that I've ever closed didn't feel like I was selling. And I think I know Nuna has got some experience selling. Savonia's been closing for. Lila's definitely been closing, even though she's quiet. Like, the best closes are always the ones that I look back and I think, damn, I didn't really feel like I did much selling. You know, there's a reason for that. Has anybody seen, this is going to be really, really stupid. Has anybody seen the first Happy Gilmore movie? Either like a thumbs up or anything like that. Okay, gotcha. You haven't seen Happy Gilmore. Well, anyway, he's a dude that plays golf essentially, and he's learning to play golf. He's an ex-hockey player, ice hockey, and he's just learning to play golf. And all of a sudden, he hits a hole in one, you know, which means like from the tee, he's hit it like 500 yards, and it's gone straight in the hole. And he says, "Oh my God, that was so much easier than putting." Like when you get on the green and you kind of do the shot. It's like, well, yeah, because you only did it in one shot, but you didn't do any of the other work. And that's what selling should be. It isn't like handling all these rebuttals and just like setting yourself up for a possibility of failure. It's covering all the basics before we get the opportunity for these objections to become real. Okay. Like when it comes to us not trying to sell ourselves and us like genuinely diagnosing a problem, it's been a while since I've been to the doctors, you know, but like, there we go. JT's trying to join. If any of you have been to like a doctor recently, or you've been to the hospital, right? And I'll give you the age-old example that everybody seems to use when they talk about this topic, which is like you go into the doctors, you say you got a headache, you know. Just picture this: you're walking into the doctor's office, you sit in the waiting room, he calls your name, you walk in, you say, "Doctor, doctor, my head hurts," and he goes, "Let me stop you there. I know exactly what it is that you need." Pulls out his prescription pad, starts writing it out in the scribble that nobody else can understand, slams the prescription on the table and goes, "See you next time." You just kind of sat there like, dude, all I told you was like my head hurt, you know? Like, you haven't asked me how long it's been hurting for, where on my head it hurts, you know, what this pain is preventing me from doing, you know? That is what a doctor does, you know? You walk in there, they have their frame, they ask you a set amount of questions, and you know that by the time they hand you that prescription, you're like, damn, this dude gets me. And you trot yourself off to the pharmacy or the next room next door with your prescription with a big smile on your face because you feel understood. If we prescribe before that diagnosis, that's where we lose trust. So that's like the first thing. This is before we're trying to handle objections. It's just getting the person to see us as the only other individual in the room that gets them. And it also just avoids the risk of us prescribing wrong, if that makes sense, guys. Everybody, if you're taking notes, either on your laptop or written down, I want you to write this down, okay? Because this is going to be a quick little kind of mental hack for you guys to remember this moving forward. Average reps focus on themselves. Average reps focus on the offer that they're selling. They try to sell the service. I just want to know if they'll buy, basically. That's what average reps do. Elite reps only ever focus on the prospect. Instead of, I just want to know if they'll buy, I just want to know if I can actually help them. And it sounds really silly there, guys, but that subtle shift, it completely changes your pacing. It changes like where your thoughts come from and where you fabricate these questions from, you know. And it also really does wonders for your tonality. You guys, if you've been on my calls before, or you've like seen any of the calls that I've closed in the past, like tonality is huge for me because it's another way of me to get emotional depth to the conversation. And if you rewire the intentions behind why you're asking certain questions, those questions are going to take you in completely different directions, if as if like compared to if you're only focusing on you getting something out of the conversation. Quick head nod, quick thumbs up. Making sense so far, guys?
On this note, like, how do we know, like, quick gut check, when we're on a call with the prospect, that we're focusing too much on us and we're not focusing on them? Word tracks aside, just in terms of like quick gut check.
Perfect. You always ask the interesting questions, Nuna, which is why I love to have you here, because it's the right question to ask. I'm not going to give you guys absolutes because there's no absolutes or definites in sales. That's like the one thing I'll always stand by. Like somebody else's strategy could work really well for this person and not very well for that person over there. A quick gut check, though, for yourself on a sales call is if you find yourself, and I used to do this all the goddamn time, if you find yourself slowly but surely, like the longer somebody's talking, if you find yourself drifting towards thinking about what question you're going to ask next, instead of continuing to listen to that person, that's when you know your subconscious is focused more on you're getting something out of this than what can the prospect get out of this conversation. If you're focused on what the next question is going to be, instead of truly listening to make sure that the next question that you were thinking of asking is actually the best question you can ask. If you catch yourself rushing and skipping that step of genuinely and actively listening, that's when you know your focus is drifting just slightly. Does that make sense? Fabulous. When you're, let's have a quick look. What's this question? Open up the chat from Cara. We're saying, isn't it a little harder as a new rep when we're trying to learn frameworks in sales? Abso-fucking-lutely. I never said it was easy. I said this stuff was simple. It's the difference between simple and easy. Of course, there's that learning curve. When you're a new rep, you want to make sure you're saying the right stuff. You want to make sure you're following a framework, you're following a process. Maybe it's because there's leadership above you that's handed you a proven process that's worked and you want to get it right. You know, there's a script that has a certain question next in the flow, whereas your gut might be wanting to ask a different question and you're kind of battling yourself as to what's the right angle. Who knows? Exactly. It's almost like I've been there before. You know, I know exactly what you guys are feeling. At the end of the day, like once we've got competence out of the way and we understand the reason why the questions are on the script in the first place, and I'll rephrase that. Instead of your focus being as a new rep, Cara, to understand and memorize the script, the best thing that you can do, and it's what I love to do with all of the guys that I have one-on-ones with, one of them being Nuna a few months ago when we got started, is understanding why that question is on the script in the first place. Because I promise you, there's a lot of questions that you can ask that take you to the exact same outcome. So if you understand the reason why that question is on the script, and it could be any question, it could be the first one you ask after framing the call, it could be the last like commitment question, temp check as you finish off your discovery. If you understand why that question's there, you don't need to be constantly memorizing and thinking about what the next question is you need to ask, because if you understand the reason why, the conversation is 100% dictated on what the prospect is saying. And if you're not listening to what the prospect is saying, that's when we end up tying ourselves in knots or just going around in circles and not advancing the sale forward. So very good point, Cara. Of course, you need to be competent. You need to be confident in your abilities as well, that you understand the sales process. But once you've got that basic framework, and you really don't need to be an expert, you just need to understand why the question's there. Once you've got that covered, the only interesting thing that's happening on the sales call is it should be coming out of the prospect's mouths, not ours. Does that somewhat answer your question, Cara? I know it's probably not the answer you were looking for, you know, but hopefully it makes sense. Understand why the question is there. Convo flows better. Beautiful. A fantastic book for us all to read, by the way. I'm going to put it here in all caps, apparently, because I really mean it. There we go. Socratic Selling. One of the most beautiful books that I've read when it comes to like the artistic side of sales. Nuda's going to be laughing because she knows how much I fucking love this stuff. So I'm probably going to take myself on a rabbit hole here. But Socratic Selling is probably the best way I could describe my style of selling, which is the only thing that dictates what comes out of my mouth is what comes out of the prospect's mouth. There is not a single time that I will not give some kind of answer, statement, or probing question back at somebody that doesn't have something to do with what literally just came out of their mouths. You know, it doesn't have to be the last thing that came out of their mouths. If they went on a bit of a monologue, I'm going to cherry pick the more important things. But it is always going to be redirecting it back to the context that they've given me, because that is where it becomes a conversation instead of an interrogation. You know, so anybody that wants to get good at that, Socratic Selling, it's one of the best books that I've read on selling personally. When you guys are detaching yourselves from the outcome as well, is probably like another kind of temp check for yourselves to realize that you're on the right track. And I'm gonna laugh myself through this because I know you're all going to be rolling your eyes at me. Okay, so prepare yourselves to roll your eyes nice and hard. Detaching ourselves as sales reps basically means, guys, stop being focused on the fucking money. You know, you bunch of sleazy scumbags, you're only focused on the money. How dare you? You know, come on. We're in sales because we want to make more money, right? Like, yeah, I love changing people's lives, and genuinely, like, the number one goal on course for me is to help that person, because I know if I help that person, I get a bigger pocket. You know, I get more commissions. I get to treat mumsy to more trips. You know, I get to take myself for more massages. You know, taking the leaf out of Nuna's book. You know, go to more spa days. But genuinely, when you detach yourself from the outcome, guys, and you make the outcome not about you, right? And you just remove yourself from the equation and you just treat yourself as the expendable one. Like, the only person that matters here is the prospect. I guarantee that you're going to notice that you listen more, okay? And because you listen more, you ask better questions. And because you ask better questions and you sit in that silence, you let people expand, they're going to trust you more as well. Now, you guys all know that my process is about lowering sales resistance as much as possible. We make less assumptions. Exactly. That's like the number one cardinal sin in sales, is making assumptions. Like, it's the one thing I do when I'm looking at call reviews and somebody assumes something in a statement. It's the first thing I pause and I go back to. I'm like, you kind of fucked up there. You know, that's not really what they said, is it? You know, we cannot be guessing, we cannot be assuming. And the more questions we ask, the more clarity we get from the only person that their opinion matters on the call, which is the prospect itself. Okay, we are not auditioning the client. Okay, they're auditioning for your help. Okay, so like, we're not here trying to, how do I put this in a way that's going to be easier for you guys to understand? We're not here necessarily trying to pick holes in the prospects. You know, we're here to allow them to prove to us why they need our help. And when you look at it from those two perspectives, one of them is basically more about, we're pushing our agenda on the prospect, you know, which you can still close people like that. You might just run into like chargebacks or people asking for refunds because they feel pressured into a decision. When we look at the other avenue, guys, we're just allowing them to step into their own truth. Okay, like, you're the professional at the end of the day. Like, you guys detaching yourself from the outcome is going to change the way you show up. You know, like, they need you and not the other way around, but we need to be the person that allows them to realize that. And the only way that we can do that is by asking questions. Okay. Now, I want to give you guys a very quick example of, we'll stick with the rookie versus like elite comparison. What are we selling if we are selling something already? Or like, what's an industry that you guys would be interested in selling? Just like paste it in the chat, for example. I know Nuna and I have spoken, but like, What offers are other people selling on if you are selling already, or what's like an offer or an industry that you'd be interested in selling in, just so I can try and keep these examples nice and relevant for you guys. Career coaching. Okay, that's a badass one. I like that. I'll sit with BizOp then. Career coaching, BizOp, it's like people looking for that new opportunity. B2B marketing. Lila and JT are going to want to the B2B marketing side of things, so I'll try and keep it relevant to that too. So with the career coaching example, let's say Cara, a prospect jumps on your call and like, yeah, like I want your help because like I just don't feel fulfilled in my current role. I'm not making enough money as I feel like I could be, and XYZ. The rookie rep goes, oh, that's perfect. Because like our programs are specifically designed for like exactly that, and this is how it works. I'm like, sucks, dude. Like you're only really going to close people that are already closed. They're already sold. They just need the confirmation from somebody like verbally, like on a call. Now we all know what I would like to do, which is fucking get people to expand. You know, like let's say like I want to make more money. You know, okay, gotcha. So like making more money and feeling fulfilled in your position is obviously the main goal. But like before we talk about the nuts and bolts as to how we get you there, like can I ask like what is it about feeling fulfilled and making more money in your role that's important to you in the first place? That is what we need to get deeper on, guys, not just identifying the problem, because I'm being honest, like most prospects are going to do that for you anyway. You could ask the first question of your call, they're going to say, like, I'm fat and I don't like it, you know, like we were talking on last week. You know, who was here last week? I know Savonia was here, Lila was, I think JT was, I believe, as well. Like healthy tension, you know, asking these questions that allow people to expand on their problem is how they create tension themselves, as opposed to us feeling like we have to pressure them into feeling a certain way. That's where those easy sales come from, guys, that I was talking about earlier in the call. You know, the easiest sales are the ones that just kind of, they feel like they just kind of happen. You know, you think, damn, did I do anything there? So yes, you ask the necessary questions for the prospect to create the tension for themselves. And guess what? Who's the one that makes the decision at the end of the call? Is it you guys or is it the prospect? It's a lot easier if they feel like it was their idea. And that's what the expanding that we ask them to go through does for us. That's what the probing does, you know. And this is something that genuinely, if I could say like top three, I won't call it top like one, top three issues that like new reps, you know, Cara, you're asking that question probably because you're a newer rep. Beautiful. Let's make sure you don't build the bad habits and you don't need to re-break the bone later on. If someone gives you an answer to a question, guys, so I'm not just going to talk to Cara here, like you're all here listening as well. There should be three things that happens from the point that somebody gives you a statement. Okay, we either get them to dig deeper. Okay, tell me more about that. You know, could you unpack that slightly for me? Okay, like this is all stuff I had to learn the hard way, guys. So please make note of this. There's three things that you can do. Dig deeper. Example being, hey Nuna, could you tell me more about that? You know, or hey Alina, I can kind of assume what that means, but would you mind unpacking it just slightly for me? You know, that's getting them to expand, dig deeper. Okay. We can label something, you know, which is another thing that I like to do like at least half a dozen times on a sales call, like 5, 6, 7 times through the process. Like when someone gives us an answer, like expanding more on the career one, for example, they say, oh, like I'm not making enough money. Like I'm doing all the work and like I feel like in another opportunity, like I would have the opportunity to be granted like more rewards for the effort that I'm putting in, and because of that I just feel like I'm wasting my time, you know. So labeling that would be, oh gotcha, so like you're feeling like this opportunity that you're in right now in this current situation, you're feeling like that's the thing that's really wasting your time. So that's like an example of a label. We make it real. And the reason we like to label things throughout a sales call is because when we come to like handling objections later on, if it does come up, there's there's like a breadcrumb in the sales call that we labeled. It's like a bookmark, you know. I like to use like post-it notes in my books when I'm reading. Like I just kind of stick it there and I can see it hanging out the side of the page. And I remember, oh, if I want to find it, I go straight back to that point. So it's why we label it. We make them say it out loud. So they might hint at it, but then we confirm it by labeling. So that's the second thing. We either get them to dig deeper, okay? Once they've dug deeper, we can label it, okay? Or we can start to mirror their response, you know, being observers of what's happening, you know. So like with the career example, it's like, oh, I get the sense that this might have been kind of weighing on you for a while. It's very similar to labeling, but it comes across from the perspective of, like, tonality does a big part of that. It's like I'm just presenting what I believe, or what, based on what you're telling me, it seems to be doing to you. It's where a bit more of like the empathy comes into play than just labeling. Labeling is just taking their words and labeling it. Mirroring somebody's belief and saying, like, starting with like, it seems, you know, is you coming across with an empathetic tone, mirroring how you feel based on what they're telling you. Okay, so we dig deeper, tell me more about that. We label it, damn, so like this is the thing that's been holding you back, you know. Or we mirror a belief. I get the sense that you've maybe been trying to figure this out for a while, and it's getting tougher and tougher the longer it goes on. Yeah. So it's those three things. That's like a quick little hack. If someone gives you something that's surface level, those are three opportunities to get them to expand by literally just using what it is that they told us. Okay. But from that, we're confirming we can help. Okay. That these people feel seen, they feel heard. And like with the empathetic mirroring as well, that they feel safe enough to open up. Right. And that we're not raising that sales resistance. Because the less we raise that sales resistance, the more real these people's answers are going to be. You know, if they feel like you're taking them down a word track because you're trying to manipulate them, they're not going to be honest with you guys. I mean, I wouldn't be. I would downplay my problems. I would not make as big a deal about my goals as I really wanted to, because like I would just be playing into your game, essentially. Too real. Exactly. You know, so outcome of job number one, guys, identifying that you can actually help this person. The outcome should be that they, like, not just they, but you know exactly who you're speaking to, right? Like what these people need, and more importantly, why it matters to them, I'd say is probably a very important point. But also, like, I think that the gist of it, just to keep it simple, is that regardless of how much this person was a stranger when they jumped on the call, that by the end of the call, you are the only person, or at least the first person that comes to mind, that if they were to question who gets me, fucking Nuna gets me. Savonia, she just gets me. Like, Cara, thank you, because like you just really seem to understand me. That is one of the best compliments you can get as a sales rep. Not when somebody says to you at the end of the call, oh, you're really good at this, like you're really good at your job, because that means they're not going to close, you know. But when someone says to you, thank you for pushing me. Like the amount of times I've gone through objection handling word tracks, guys, and I've closed people, you know, by either hard closing them or taking them through a symphonic approach of just emotional word tracks, and somebody says thank you for pushing me through that. That is the best compliment you can get, you know. But them feeling like you understand them is just in the same bucket, you know. But it doesn't need to be you closing them. It could just be you understanding them during discovery. Chase that as your trophy, honestly, because the more people you get to thank you or say out loud that fuck me, Tyler, it's like I've known you my entire life, and it's like you've been through what I've been through. That is when you know you're no longer just you're no longer a stranger trying to flog a product. You are the person in their life that gets them. And who are they going to lean towards when it comes to doing something about this, guys? Is it going to be their partner? that's not helped them do anything about this? You know, is it going to be a friend that they're going to ask for an opinion of? No, no, it's going to be you, because you've built that trust. How are we feeling about job number 1 so far, guys?
Could you dumb it down? Especially in terms of the mirroring aspect of it. So sometimes people, and not sometimes, all the time, people, you get talkers, people who just can't stop talking, like what I'm doing right now. And what do you mirror? Do you mirror the last thing they said? Do you mirror something like sort of a mash in between? And then it gets kind of messy. Do you have any tips on
Yeah,
how
give
to
me
stop?
give me an example of like a pain in the ass prospect blabbing about random stuff. Let's just role play it, and I'll show you what I mean by like emotionally mirroring their
Okay.
pain situation.
Okay. Do you want to ask the question first?
Just like give me like any answer to any question, the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah, let's say fitness. I've been overweight because I've went through a divorce and my kids are really difficult, and I've tried so many things on YouTube and it just doesn't work out for me because I've been giving it so much time. I work out like 4 hours a day and I'm still fat and flabby, and then I find myself getting injured because, I'm doing all the wrong things. Okay.
Yeah, beautiful. So like, but before I am, so here's an example of what I mean by like there's times and places for certain stuff. So even though you just offloaded a ton of that stuff to me, and like I want to give you the answer to like the emotional mirroring, for example, which I will. The easiest thing you can do for that, and Lila can speak to this. I used to use this on calls on the fitness offer that we're working on together all the time. I'd be like, wow, that's that's really tough, you know. Or it's like, damn, Luna. Damn, that's seems like you've really been through the thick of it, you know. But like with that example you just gave me, all of that blabbing, like you were giving me so much gold, by the way. I was like fucking panting like a dog over a fucking pork chop, you know, just waiting for to probe and to dig
Yeah.
deeper. But to kind of to your point is like emotionally mirroring then before you probe is also an option, guys. You know,
Mm.
it's just another opportunity to get the person to feel like you get them. So like you offloading all of that information to me, like you verbally seeing me kind of nodding my head, and like obviously I was going like this because like you were just bringing more and more and more and stuff, but like you can kind of nod, you let them
Yeah.
know they're listening, maybe you're like taking notes and just like making sure that they can see you like this, like you guys seeing me do this, like noting something, you can tell that I'm fucking listening to whatever it is that you're saying. Okay, so
Okay.
use that as well. And then after they've done like offloading and monologuing, like the worst thing you can do is rush to fill the space. We calm. Wow, that's a lot. It seems like it's it seems like you've really been through the thick of it, huh, Nuna? You know. And I could leave it there without like probing or digging deeper immediately without letting you answer. Or I could just say that and let silence and that awkward tension allow you to expand and go, yeah, you know what, it has been tough because of XYZ. You know, but if you don't do that, I've
Mm.
emotionally mirrored you. You can tell that physically and emotionally, like you can tell, like I grew up in a household full of women, right, guys? I've got a lot of feminine energy behind me, and I was literally having this conversation with Nuna in our one-to-one before this. Like, it's something I can't get rid of. I'm very expressive, but it helps me get away with murder on my sales calls because I'm like noticeably like upset. I would have started my call up here, you know, calm, like there's no problems for me to talk about, but like I might start doing this and like kind of scratching my head and be like, oh Jesus, man, like that's really tough, you know. Like when you said that it's been bringing up kind of issues in your marriage though, Nuna, like forgive me for wanting to assume, but what is it that you meant by that exactly? No. That's doing two things at once. That's digging deeper, and it's emotionally mirroring or just like mirroring a certain belief that they have. Like they believe they're going through struggles. I do too now. And now I'm one other person outside of themselves that also understands them emotionally. Just by taking a second to pause and let them know that I give a fuck. Because believe it or not, guys, even though I'm having this conversation, I'm going inside and outside of role plays. It seems like I'm acting. I mean, I am, you know, but like I'm doing it with the sole intention of getting the prospect to the place they want to go, not where I want them to go. I want them to go there because they want to go there. It's as simple as that. And the emotional labeling of me, damn man, it seems like this is really weighing on you, you know. But then contextualize it and have the opportunity to dig deeper if they haven't already expanded to the depth that you know they need to, you know. And there's no magic finish line, guys, that you guys can say, oh, they said this, so that means I can move on to the next part of the sales call. This is where we're all grown-ups, we're all big boys and big girls, you know. JT and I are outnumbered here, most of us big girls, you know. Like we all have a gut feeling. I call it the bullshit meter, you know. It's like my British bluntness coming out there, but it's like you all know that when you've got a close friend or a family member or even a stranger and they're telling a bit of a porcupine, they're telling a lie, something that isn't quite true, and you go, huh, that doesn't seem too right, you know. Trust that goddamn instinct. We were all born with it, you know. There's a reason we're all still alive today, you know. We've made decisions, we've had instincts, we've had gut feelings that we shouldn't make certain decisions, like no, I probably shouldn't jump off that cliff, you know. Probably shouldn't drive into head-on traffic, you know. We're all born with it. Trust your instinct, guys. And if you feel like you've got gold but you don't understand why it's gold yet, you know, like, oh, I found a problem, this person's 140 pounds overweight, you know, and like clearly they're morbidly obese. That's understanding the gold. Well, it's identifying the gold, sorry, but it's not understanding why it's gold to them. Once you understand why it matters to them, that's when we can kind of move on. That makes sense? Beautiful. Now, Jesus, 40 minutes. See, this is what happens, guys. You can tell I like this too much. I just get off on a fucking tangent. But I'll try and wrap this up without too much time. Who here has like a hard stop at the hour, just so I know how much I need to rush through this, or who's going to have like an extra 10 minutes or so after the hour? Cool. Just put in the chat if you need to run immediately, and I'll try and speed things up for you. Job number 2, though, because we haven't covered job number 2 yet. Job number 2 is handling all the objections before the close. If you guys can understand if and how you can help somebody, right? Now we need to make sure that we're doing our best to save them from themselves, right? If you want to look at it that way. I want to save these prospects from the part of themselves that got them stuck in the first place, okay? Now, this is the part of the conversation that a lot of you, especially any of the newbies or the beginners like Cara, you know, not calling you a beginner, but just anybody who's maybe not as versed as some other people in sales, this is where a lot of you are going to start to question the morality of a sales conversation, because I did. Again, I came from a very feminine background. You know, I didn't come from a like grizzly father that told me that you've just got to force people to do what's best for them kind of thing. It's like, no, like I grew up in a very feminine household that everybody's emotions and everybody's feelings mattered, you know, regardless of where they came from. So this is the part of the conversation where it becomes very like morally questioning, you know, am I manipulating somebody badly, you know? And like with great power, Spider-Man quote for you guys, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. The ability that I have in sales to manipulate people, you know, if I used it for dark, right, I could end up in jail. But I'm using it for light. I'm using it for good, because I'm only manipulating people into doing the things that they are fucking telling me they want, and in some cases need to do. Now, not everybody acts in alignment with their best intentions, do we? Do we, guys? You know, like I should have quit smoking a long goddamn time ago. You know, I mean, I did quit smoking a long time ago, but I also smoked about half a packet, or if it was on the weekend and I was having a couple of these, about a packet and a half a night. You know, I was like a chimney. I knew if I quit smoking that dark magic for good. Exactly. You know, like that's the way I look at this. Like I have a superpower and I need to make sure I use it for good. Otherwise, I'm going to have a bunch of villains on my back, you know, like we don't always act in our best intentions. I had no doubt that if I quit smoking, I'd feel healthier. You know, I wouldn't cough as much. I wouldn't get sick as much. People wouldn't fucking dislike me standing around them on our lunch breaks at work as much, you know, but I still didn't quit. I knew it was good for me. I still didn't make the decision. How many of your prospects are going through the same shit? You know, that's why we need to make sure that we're not just taking their surface level wants and desires as the line in the sand. We've got to challenge it. We've got to make sure we're covering and, well, uncovering all the stones that we need to, that takes away their power, okay? Takes away the power from the version of themselves that got them stuck in the first place, and gives the power back to the tiny, tiny voice in the back of their heads that is screaming out for help. Okay, like every major objection, whether it's like a value-based finance objection, you know, because the only finance objection you can overcome really is somebody that like is willing to get resourceful, right, and has the opportunity to get resourceful to find funds even if they don't have it themselves. If they're on an island in the middle of nowhere and they don't have access to credit and stuff like that, there's no matter how good your objection handling is, they don't have the money. Okay, so don't beat yourself about that one. But if it's like a value-based money objection, my personal favorite is I'm too busy, I don't have the time. I mean, fucking yawn at that one. Partner, I've got to run this by my partner, you know. Trust, a fear-based, a logistic-based objection, whatever the fuck it is, you know. I feel like all of them can and should be prevented if we're asking the right questions during discovery. Genuinely. Does anybody disagree with me on that? Like, does anybody, I know we've probably not been selling for years, but just so like I'm not railroading anybody and just kind of saying, oh, like everything I say is right. Like, does anybody disagree with the fact that if you have the right conversation and you ask the right questions before you price drop, do you believe that you guys should still be getting objections that you can't overcome? Okay, the fact that no one's raising their hand, unmuting themselves, or commenting tells me that you agree with me. Only real objections should be logistical. There we go. I don't have the money or like any other fucking logistical reason as to why a decision cannot be made. So if we know that to be true, then now we need to understand, how do we identify spouse? Don't get me started. So if we know that to be true, and like we're all on the same page, and not just saying it to put a smile on my face, that you agree with me that if we take people through the right process, we ask the right questions, we can eliminate and just completely get rid of any reasons or objections they'd have to object to our service, then we know that they don't pop out of nowhere, which means that we can also identify where they're coming from in our sales conversation, right? Like there should be ways that we can pick up on these possible seedling objections, that if we don't pay attention to them, right, and we don't rip the weed out from the root now, they could grow into a monstrosity that's going to take us so much more effort to get rid of later on. Hence why pre-handling objections is so much better than rebuttals. You know, I asked, I don't know if JT, can you hear me, dude? You got me in the background. If you can hear me, tell me if you've watched Happy Gilmore, because I think I asked this before you jumped on.
I don't think I have, honestly. I know it's the golfing one.
Is it just me that's the weirdo that, like, it's such a good movie, guys? It is hilarious, by the I don't know if you're Adam Sandler fans. Sometimes his stuff can be a bit stupid, like some of the grown-up stuff. But Happy Gilmore's a solid movie. But he makes a hole in one, I was saying, JT, and he goes, oh my God, that was so much easier than having to like hit the other shots in the meantime and putts. Like, well, yeah, it's a lot easier to pre-handle the objections than it is for you to deal with them after you've price dropped, because then there's like no unknowns yet. You know, it's a lot easier to hold somebody accountable before they've like seen just how scary something is, and getting their verbal agreement before that, it completely changes the way you handle objections. So at the end of the day, we should be able to handle at least 90% of these objections, whether it's fear-based, you know, not logistical, like fear-based. 90% of them we should be able to handle before the price even becomes real, before you even talk about your product, ideally. Only happy people buy. What do you mean by that?
You got to put me on the spotlight again, right? I think when we were talking about fear and uncovering some of their objections before we even pitch or before we even close them, I remember you mentioning something about like changing the tune of the conversation. Because
Yes.
once you go through like what happens if you let your spouse hold you back, what happens if you let your, you've never found the finances for it before, what happens if, da 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 da, next six, blah 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 blah, a future basing it. And then they're in this like depressed state where they're like, yeah, I suck. I've been making terrible decisions, and like they're in this very low energy mood. They're not going to be likely to pay $10,000
Correct.
solution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's so I'm glad I called you out, because you've just segued us beautifully into the 6 beliefs. There's technically, you could call it 7 beliefs, one of them being finances. 4 years into my high ticket journey, guys, I've genuinely not benefited from trying to identify or pick holes in people's finances during the discovery. And I know it's a bit of an unpopular opinion with a lot of the coaches or gurus in the space nowadays, because they're like, oh, you need to financially qualify them before you pitch. It's like, it's kind of like the same thing, where even though I do pay attention to people bringing up their spouses, or business partners during a conversation, I still know how beautifully powerful and capable and willing human beings can be. And that's why I purposely don't try to disqualify people financially. Obviously, there's like a thin line, right? If someone calls me from, I don't know, like fucking the middle of nowhere, Timbuktu, and they tell me they haven't had a job in the past 2 years, I might ask a couple of financially qualifying questions before I spend 45 minutes trying to build a relationship with this person, But like, if it's every other prospect and like they're not giving me any red flags, I won't try and dig into their finances, because I know if I do a good enough job, the money is just another logistical obstacle that we can overcome with financial resourcefulness. So like, we can call it 7 beliefs, and it's pain, doubt, cost, desire, money, support, and trust. I don't necessarily talk about money too much, so we can keep it down to 6. Pain, whether it's a problem, okay, pain or problem. Doubt, okay, pain, doubt. Do they doubt you, or do they doubt themselves? Cost, obviously, what's the emotional cost if nothing changes? Desire, what's the outcome that we're stepping into? Pain, doubt, cost, desire, money. Support, so is their support system gonna like sabotage this? Do they agree with them? Are they in support of it? Are they going to be there as like another leg to the support system? Support and trust. Okay, do they trust you? Do they trust that this is right for them? So those are 6 beliefs, and I'm about to expand on them, but let's get to JT's answer. How do you cut the call short once you realize they're unqualified? Dude, I'm going to give you like a ridiculously blunt answer, so don't take this the wrong way. You just cut the call short because they're unqualified. It's as simple as that. Obviously, you don't want to be like, go fuck yourself, I can't help you, right? Let's be real. Don't want to go on that end of the spectrum here, guys, right? Be like, ugh, brokey, and just like close your screen. Don't do that, right? But what it is that you want to do, like, here's a funny term of phrase that I heard of the other day, and I really liked it. Your last impression is the lasting impression. So take that how you will. First impressions last, but your last impressions are the lasting ones, because it's the last thing that somebody has to judge you on. So don't be rude. Okay, be respectful. Best case scenario, you can have a free resource. Okay, I mean, everybody should have a free resource for their offer. I know you and Lila, like it being your offer itself, have a free resource. You can use it for generating leads. Okay, and you can also use it to palm off to the people that can't afford you yet. So you say, look, with all due respect, I'm glad we got it this early on, just so I wasn't wasting your time. Okay, remember, we always position our best interests as the best interests of the prospects. Okay, this is coming back to that manipulative side of sales, right? But like, I want you to do what's best for you, and what's best for you is not paying for my thing, so I don't want to waste your time, okay, and I also don't want to waste my time. So what's probably going to be best is if you go and take a look at this for the meantime, and then we can circle back in a few months' time once we're a bit more financially prepared to talk to this. Does that make sense? Does that sound like a fair idea? So don't overcomplicate it. You are literally just following a process. You are an expert that understands exactly who it is that you can and should help. And if someone does not or cannot be willing to fit into that same bucket, you cut the ties. Because at the end of the day, if you do continue with your process, you're just doing that person an injustice because you can't help them. They're not qualified. Does that make sense, JT? I'll say there's a yes.
Sorry.
All good, bro. All good. So walking us through the 6 beliefs, and I'll try not go off on too much of a tangent, but if you guys are taking notes, this is going to be an interesting one to take notes for. Talking about like what these beliefs sound like and how we can identify them. If we the way that you get an inkling to understand that you've got to build someone's belief around the fact that they have a problem in the first place is noticing if they're like downplaying it. Like they might be telling you about a problem, but we need to confirm that like the problem is deep enough, like it's an emotionally deep enough problem for them to feel like it needs fixing. You know, if your gut is telling you that they're just talking about it and they're just saying the problem, but you can sense they're either downplaying it or it's not a big enough problem that if use yourself as a judge, like if it's not a big enough problem that you think, excuse me, it was something worth doing about, like the prospect's probably not going to feel that same way too. You know, so they might not even be bringing up a problem, or they might just be downplaying it. We want to make sure that they are emotionally deep enough and understanding enough that this is a problem that they don't want to keep having to live with. It needs fixing. A question we could ask to bring out the problem that allows us to build the belief that they have in the first place is like when, give me an example, guys. We were talking about the fitness, being 20 pounds overweight. When does like you noticing this weight kind of hit you the most? You know, get them to expand, get them to probe. What's the most frustrating thing about the 20 pounds that you're literally carrying around? You know, that's why I love talking about fitness offers. Or it's like B2B lead gen, for example. Like when over the past 12 months, or like when was the moment that you noticed most that you guys had room for improvement in the way that you guys were generating leads? You know, it was a terrible way to word it. It's like, when was the first time you noticed that there was room for improvement in the way that you guys were generating leads? You know, I'm just getting them to expand on the problem. You know, oh damn, like how does that actually show up when you guys aren't generating the amount of leads that you need to be? You know, I'm probing, I'm expanding. You know, that's what we ask to get them to go from surface level problem to no, Tyler, like you need to understand this is why it's a problem. Okay. It's when they step in and your questions allow them to almost prove you wrong. You know, I want to lean into them and be like, oh, but like, why is that a problem? You know, like they're expecting me to take their problem and be like, oh my God, yeah, like that needs fixing immediately. Oh my God, yes, wow, that's the exact reason why we have this solution in place. That's probably what a lot of these people are expecting you to do. No, fuck that. I'm not gonna make it that easy for them. I'm gonna get them to prove to me that they deserve me to pitch them. So I'm going to lean away. Be like, well, why is that a problem? You know, get them to lean in and expand on the problem itself, just to make sure that they're not hiding behind a facade of like, I can keep handling this when they really can't. So that's pain or problem. First belief. Second belief is their doubt. This is the point that Nuna, I almost called you Luna for some reason, and I don't know why. The point that Nuna was making a second ago about if we've done our job right and we've got them to identify like the cost of inaction, which we'll talk about in a second, and like they understand their problem is something that desperately needs fixing, and like we've done a good enough job of making them realize that they are broken and they need fixing, and I'm the guy to get them that help. There's also a step that we can go too far, because broken people, okay, truly broken and like victimizing themselves people are not going to make a decision to change. We also need to make them realize that they are capable of change. So the doubt is, do they doubt themselves to even show up to something like this? Because I mean, how many people can think of an objection? I know Nuna, I know Lila, you've had this, you know, Savon, you probably had this on calls as well in the past. Alina, I don't know if you're closing yet, but maybe on role plays you've had it where you've done an objection where someone says, I just don't know if I'm going to be able to pull through this. You know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show up. And at that point in the call, you're like, oh my God, I took them too far. You know, it's a pendulum. We don't want to swing it too far. We want to empower people and make sure they don't like doubt that they are capable of doing something, and like a sign, a signal that someone is going to be doubtful of either your solution being the right one for them, or like whether it's going to work for them, or they're able to kind of show up. Is like, I've tried everything. You know, so many people jump at a call and they're like, oh, I've tried so much. Like, Tyler, I promise you, I've tried everything. And what everything means is like they've paid a couple of people to try something, they've watched a handful of YouTube videos, you know, but like to them it's everything, you know. But I just want to separate like me being the answer to everything. Like if it's an offer where it's like a mentorship or a coaching and they're involved in the processes, when it's not like a done for you kind of thing, like lead generation, like if it's any biz op or any B2C virtually, like any fitness offer, life coaching, I've got to empower the person that they are going to show up, you know, and I cannot make it all about the product. I want to get them to realize that them blaming the previous offers of what didn't work is quite literally the exact thing that's going to keep them stuck. Okay, so the questions that I want to ask is not so much like, I do want to also get curious about past solutions they've gone through, of course, but I want to talk about them. Like a question that always comes to mind for me when somebody mentions, like, and this comes up a lot in fitness, or like when people are working on a new project at work, or they're working on like a new career, a side project, trying to make that into their full-time thing, and they struggle to stay consistent. I always like to ask, what's been the thing that's made it hardest for you to stay consistent? I'm not talking about the product or the service or the support or the coaching they had in the past. I'm talking about them. What's the hardest thing for you? Okay. What's the hardest thing that made it for you to keep showing up and staying consistent? You know, an analogy that it puts a smile on my face because it's a funny analogy. At least it makes me laugh. And I heard somebody talk about this in a fucking podcast, and I think I might have mentioned this on last week's call, but I heard someone talk about it on a podcast, and you can tell how sad I am because I went, oh my God, that would be like a really good reframe in a sales call. And it's basically along the lines of me saying to the prospects, like they've tried, they've paid for a solution once, right? And just because they paid for it, that should have been the thing that got them what it is that they needed, but maybe the support that they got wasn't up to scratch, or the person wasn't qualified enough, and now they're just kind of demonizing the whole industry. A cool analogy for you guys to use is one that I talk about when it's like pianos. I speak to somebody and I'm like, can I ask you something? Like, do you know how to play the piano? Most people don't, I've found out, funnily enough, including myself. And I say to them, I was like, if I just bought you a piano, I know it sounds silly, but if I just bought you a piano and I plonked it in your living room, does that mean that you automatically know how to play the piano? And they go, well, no. Can you see where I'm going with this? You know, because I want to separate them from like the product being the problem, aka the piano. It's not the fucking piano's fault you can't play it, you know, it's your fault for not staying consistent with it. That's what I want them to start questioning. I don't want them blaming, and I definitely don't like them blaming past solutions. If anything, I like talking up their past coaching solutions, because I want them to see that I'm completely unbiased, right? And I'm making it about them. I want them to be the person to step in and go, do you know what? I've kind of got to take ownership. You know, I want to take ownership of the fact that maybe I didn't follow through, because when they take ownership of that they could have done more in the past, there's no room for them doubting their capabilities. I've solved that problem. You know, I want them to believe, and I want to confirm that change is the right move for them. Okay. I'm going to burn through the other four, sorry, because I don't want you guys to stay too long and take up too much of your time on this Saturday. But if you are not clear, please just like raise your hands or post a comment in the chat so I know that someone's not following. I won't keep confirming if you guys are following. The next belief is cost. We all know this one, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Like even I think the least salesy salesperson is going to know this. When the prospect kind of avoids the numbers or the impact of the problem, this happens a lot in B2B. Okay, business owners with an ego that are building their baby, right? Their business is their baby. Like this coaching business that I'm trying to grow, this is my baby. I've got a big ego around it. I'm gonna do my best to kind of protect it. So wouldn't that make them realize they don't need another course and not buy if they think it's them? In other words, just go back to the courses they've already bought. That's the thin line. That's like if you get people to feel like they're too broken, that's where your pitch is what solves that problem, Cara. So in discovery, I don't want them feeling like they can do it on their own, okay? Because if that was true, they would have already done it by now, and that's a reframe that you can use. Like, gotcha, like, because if then you say that and somebody says, oh yeah, like you're absolutely right, like maybe I could have done this myself this entire time, then you can also bring them back to earth and you can say, would you mind if I shared like an honest thought about that though? They're like, yeah, and be like, although I'd love for myself to be like the all-knowing oracle and like in the space of 10 or 15 minutes on a sales call, just have like solved all your problems. But like, if I kind of take that limelight away from myself for a quick sec, like if it were true and you were capable of not just believing in your ability to do it, but you also had the skill set to execute it, between you and I, Cara, do you believe you'd even be on this phone call in the first place? Or like, do you feel like the problem would be solved already? It'd be like, oh, okay, so it's a balancing act, but you're absolutely right. You don't want to lean people so far towards the other angle where like you've built up and you've broken down their doubts so much and you've built up their own belief in themselves that they're now just delusionally confident. That's the balancing act we want to do. Very rarely though, and like I'm sure other kind of the more experienced reps on here can speak of this too, aside from just myself trying to prove my point right, okay, is like very rarely are you going to have somebody that feels like super defeated and like so doubtful of anybody being able to help them to then like 5 minutes later being, oh my god, like I'm gonna run a marathon in 50 minutes. Like very rarely, like you'd need a lot more than just 25 minutes in discovery to get someone to go through that much of a revelation. But at the end of the day, like even if it does happen, you also have the resources to challenge that slightly and be like, well, okay, well, let's hold our horses real quick, because if we did have all the ingredients, and all it took was just a conversation with me, don't you think that conversation would have already happened and you'd be where you want to be by now? No? Okay, cool. So would it be safe to say that maybe we've got to learn to walk before we can run? Okay, gotcha. I just take them back into the sales conversation. But going back to the cost, a very good point though, Cara. I appreciate you bringing that up. The cost side of things is, again, what happens if things just carry on the way they are. And as I was saying, like B2B and even like B2C, when you've got these delusionally confident people, that they're like, oh, I mean, not too bad. You talk to a business, they're telling you that they're literally bleeding 25 grand a month in top line revenue, which would allow them to expand their team and go from 2 mil a year to 5 million a year, but they'll say to you, oh, it's not that bad. Once they might realize that they're on the hook slightly, they're like, oh shit, I've been a bit too honest. The sales rep really realizes that I've got a problem on my hands. Let's not let them have too much of that control. Oh, well, I guess I'll just kind of survive. If you're picking up on stuff like that from somebody, that they talk about the problem, then yeah, like we're bleeding 20 grand a month, but I guess it could be worse, and like they tell you the truth, but then they can't help but try and defend themselves afterwards. You need to make them aware of the price of not changing. We need to get them to emotionally accept the fact that if nothing changes, nothing changes. Insanity, guys. Doing the same thing and expecting a different result. We all know that term of phrase. Everybody knows it, Who was it? Einstein? What does he say about people doing the same thing and expecting different results? Take it easy, Lila. If anybody else has got to run, just let me know. Like what's the cost of not changing? What happens if nothing changes is the age-old question that people ask in this stage. I like switching it up slightly, because if they've been on sales calls, they've probably been asked for that one before. I like asking, like, what's the ripple effect? How is problem, how is like the 25 grand a month that you guys are kind of missing out on, how's that spilling over and affecting the rest of the business? Just out of curiosity, like what effect is this going to have on your time, your energy, your finances, your stress, your mental state if nothing changes? And we want to make sure they verbally agree and spiritually and emotionally align and agree with that truth that something's got to change. Okay. The other belief is their desire. Okay. So we've got pain, we've got doubt in themselves, we've got the cost of inaction. Now we've got the desire, the outcome, the payoff, so to speak. I've got to make sure they're emotionally connected to that outcome. That's what I've got to confirm before I pitch. If I pitch before I know that they're emotionally kind of connected, that's where a lot of smokescreen and I think about it's come from. It's the same with like if they just acknowledge they have a problem, but I don't get them to emotionally connect to the impact of that problem. Like what happens if that problem keeps going on? If I don't do that, me pitching early is pointless because I'm just giving them too much of an open door to just walk out through a smokescreen objection. Like, oh, I'm going to think about it, or yeah, I'm going to run this part of my partner, or maybe now's not the right time. Maybe I'm not ready. Got too much going on. No, I want to make sure I cover all of these bases before I pitch. So the desire is making sure that they're emotionally connected to what changes are actually going to be happening and how those changes are going to benefit. Because if they're downplaying that, or they're just genuinely unclear about their goals, I need to step in and fix that straight away. With fitness offers back in the day, or with B2B offers where you're like, oh, so what's the outcome you're kind of looking for from this conversation? Like, oh, just make as much money as possible. I want to lose weight and get lean, get stronger, get leaner. I mean, who the fuck doesn't want to do that, guys? I'm in pretty good shape. I wouldn't mind getting leaner, Of course, why though? If you actually solved this, what specifically changes for you in your day-to-day? Even with the most surface level and reserved B2B prospect, you asking that question is going to inevitably get them to expand emotionally, spiritually, or mentally on why that's important to them. And that's the only thing we want them to do, by the way, guys, in case it wasn't clear. Someone says, oh, dude, like, I just want to make as much money. Like you're a lead generation agency. I want you to generate as much leads as possible. Okay, gotcha. So like, let's just say we pluck a number out of the air and we're able to generate that amount of leads for you, which is as many as you'd possibly be able to handle. I mean, humor me here. Like, help me get on the same side of the table here. Help me see things from your perspective. Like, what are the first couple of things that you'd notice that would change for you? And genuinely, guys, like, it is difficult for them to think of an answer that isn't going to benefit the sales conversation. As long as you know why you're asking that question in the first place, and it's not to get a specific answer. It's not to get that one answer that every prospect needs to repeat. It's to get them to be honest with you and with themselves that there's something they're not satisfied about. It's as simple as that. Because if there's that kind of connection and the elephant in the room, that there's been the acknowledgement that they are not satisfied, that is good enough for me to keep probing on what it is they're not satisfied about. And it's the prospect's words again. I'm just probing on information they've given me. Okay, give me a quick nod if that's making sense, guys. Beautiful. Elena, you're always the first one to nod. I can tell you're paying attention. I like it. So 2 more beliefs you want to build. Bear with me. There we go. 2 more beliefs you want to build. I was just making sure no one's calling me. Support and trust. Okay. Trust is a pretty easy one. It's going to be mainly to do with like your conviction yourself. Okay. Because you being the expert, you having that conviction is going to allow you to question prospects' previous decisions. Okay. And who they've trusted and why they've trusted them in the first place. Okay. Like their decision-making process is going to be good. So you having like the conviction, which we'll talk about in a second, is important. But the support side of things is where a lot of spouse or B2B partner or like shareholder objections come from. It's when people are hesitant around their support system being game for their kind of their decision moving forward. Are they going to sabotage this decision for me? Are they going to agree? Is this person that I respect in my day-to-day, who may or may not have a single goddamn thing to do with my professional life or whatever it is that we're talking about today, but just because I respect them as a human being, do I feel the need to involve them? No. We want to cover this during the discovery, because if they believe that their decisions have anything to fucking do with their support system, like that's a limiting belief I've got to get rid of straight away. Because I mean, when's the last time that, I mean, even twins, for crying out loud, they don't pull both of them out of their mothers at the same goddamn time. They come out one by one, you know, unless they want their mum to look like a yawning hippo at some point, right? Very vulgar, but you kind of get the point I'm making. We come into this world on our own, and we are going to leave this world on our own, guys. I hate to break it to you and get super real with you on this Saturday morning, afternoon, but it's the truth. We are individuals, okay? And I think more than ever, the fact that, is JT still here? No, JT's disappeared. We're just girls on this call now, okay? We're just girls. And a lot of partner objections are going to come from female prospects. You know, they're the more difficult ones to overcome, is with female prospects. So if you guys can have the conviction that you are the kind of individuals that when you've found something that you know is right for you, and resourcefully you have the ability to get it done without involving anybody else, if you can truly believe that you're the kind of people to make that decision, the tough and uncomfortable decision to not involve your support system and do what you know is best for you and your future, because it might even impact them positively too, that's going to give you the conviction to be able to handle people's objections. You know, like the fact that I've took myself through a lot of difficult stuff in my life makes me a very qualified person to lead other people through. That's why I feel so confident on sales calls. It's why I'm so comfortable having these difficult conversations, because I've been through it myself, you know. But when we're separating people from their support systems, we need to empower them, you know. And the best way to empower them is not removing them from their support system, at least like the way I've found it through my experience anyway. It's to bring that partner into the conversation as to what the positive impact on them is going to be. You know, and this could be a B2C agreement. This could be a business owner that talks about that might have an objection towards the end of the call that says, oh, I need to run this past my team before I make the decision. That is one that a ton of B2B guys are going to run into. Like Lila and JT, they do B2B marketing agencies like lead gen offers. Best way for them to eliminate the objection of the business owner wanting to double check with his team before he makes the call or makes the decision could be like, who else do you think would notice if we managed to fix the volume of leads that you guys were getting? Oh, like I guess my sales team, you know, I guess my sales team would notice more. They've got a more packed calendar. I guess that could be a good thing. I'm keeping them busy, and maybe they wouldn't be looking for other sales jobs. Oh, like who else? I mean, maybe my fulfillment team. You know, I know there's a few guys on the fulfillment team that are like the coaches, you know, that have been asking me for more students, because they've come from part-time to full-time, and like I want to make sure they're earning enough money, you know. Now there's a benefit to not just the person that I'm speaking to, but the people that they're trying to involve in the decision-making process. There is already immediate benefits, which strengthens our ability later on the call, that even if we do get that kind of objection that, oh, like my husband isn't going to be down for this, or my team might not be interested, or my partner might have a problem with this, I've already got them to highlight the immediate benefits of us doing business together, and how not doing this is going to completely rip away any of the desired outcomes that your team has already been asking you for. So I don't want to remove them. I want to involve their support system as to what are the benefits to them going to be, and how would it feel for you to go from problem and bad situation to be able to know that you were the person that not just solved your problem, but you also solved XYZ person's problem too. Again, I'm doubling down on multiple beliefs there. I'm getting their doubt out of the way, and I'm getting their support objection out of the way. That they don't need to lean on somebody else, because we've already established just how much of a benefit it's going to be for them to make this decision. Okay. And the final one being trust. This is a difficult one. Okay, because this is one that normally leads to a lot of like testimonials. Send me some reviews, send me some people I can call, you know, just want to do some more research. I mean, what on earth does that mean? You know, this has got a lot to do with their decision-making process. So last week I was talking about how we build internal tension and not pressure. And one of the questions I was talking about is one that's like very rarely used by sales reps, is like asking about people's decision-making processes, you know, or like what goes through people's minds every time something happens. I want there to be real conversations happening on the sales call. You know, like when you invested in yourself the last time round that you told me about, like what actually went through your mind before pulling the trigger on that? Okay. And that question alone is not going to build the necessary belief or break down the limiting belief around the trust of them trusting me. Okay. What it is going to do is you're just basically doing market research to the one person that you need to do the research on, and I'm getting them to tell me what information I need to give them and what I need to show them for them to feel ready to make the decision. I want them to feel safe enough to open up to me about their decision-making process so that I can leverage it later on during discovery with the statements I make, how I transition out of discovery, but more importantly, how I present my pitch. If your pitch sounds the same to everybody, big mistake. Like, you're going to have a lifetime of heartache because you're going to say to yourself, oh my God, I nailed that pitch. Where's that hair coming from? You're going to say to yourself, oh my God, I nailed that pitch, but they didn't buy or they didn't resonate with it. It's because you didn't nail the pitch. You nailed the rehearsal of the pitch. You followed the script of the pitch. Now, when it comes to trust, and the reason I like to leave it last is because it's not one that we initially jump down people's throats with. We build it without them necessarily knowing that we're building the belief. We just ask them something to do with their decision-making process. What drew them towards the previous opportunities? What did they like about them? What didn't they like? What did they want to get fixed and what still isn't fixed? Because that's how I don't just become, this is going to be a powerful one for you guys. This is how I become not just another version of what they've already tried, AKA a repeat of the past, by me digging into what drew them to the previous opportunities and what the decision-making process was, what they liked, what they didn't like, but what still isn't fixed. That's where I now have the ability to present myself as the logical next step, not a repeat or a mistake that they made in the past. Okay. Even though like my solution is going to very rarely change on the back end. Like if someone wants to lose 45 pounds and someone wants to lose 20 pounds, like aside from someone being in my weight loss program for slightly longer, the process is going to be very similar. It's going to be very one dimensional. There's only so many times you can reinvent the wheel. But at the end of the day, it's what people need. It's it's not what they think they need. Like they want something, you know, regardless of what's best for them, but they need this thing. Like your solution is what they actually need. And we all know that to be true, but I'm going to sell them what they want so I can give them what they need. That sounds very, very manipulative, guys. And like, I know you're probably going to agree with me when I say that. It is. But what am I actually doing? Nuna, going back to our conversation earlier when we were talking about the reframes before, am I taking them closer or further away from their goal by manipulating them in that way?
Well, you're doing something for them, not to them.
Damn fucking right I am. So if I could solve world hunger, if I could have fucking done things about the Russia-Ukraine war or whatever the fuck you want to call what's going on in Palestine and Israel, right? I'm not going to talk about politics, guys. That's not one of them I'm going to do to you. But like, these are all horrible things that are happening around the world. You know, like just any kind of toxicity. If I could solve that by manipulating you motherfuckers one at a time, right, and it be a benefit to the world, I would manipulate you all. I would take no days off my manipulation. I would be manipulating night and day because I'm doing something for you guys, you know. But on a sales call, it's difficult to see that because you want to be empathetic, you want to agree with your prospect, but you've got to stay true to yourself that they came to you for a reason and we need to fix their problem one way or another. And sometimes and any great marketer will say this to you. Not many sales reps say it because they won't be as honest with you as I am. Any great marketer will, though, because the weight's off their shoulders. They sell you what you want with the advertising, but they give you what you need on the back end. That's exactly what we're doing. We're selling people what they want in our pitch because we know the product is what they need. I'm just designing the product in a way that's going to align with what it is that they believe they want or what it is they believe they need. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah. Who likes that one, or who dislikes me now because of that style of manipulation? No, I'm kidding. Don't tell me if you dislike me. Oh, someone from both sides. Like, there we go. I appreciate you, Cara. That's funny. So those are the 6 beliefs, guys. I know we went off on a tangent. This is definitely going to be a call to kind of go through the recording, but believing they have a problem and it's something that's worth fixing. Okay. Allowing them to stop doubting that they're capable, getting them to believe that change is the right move for them. The cost, that they're aware of the price of their continued inaction. The desire belief, that they're emotionally connected with the changes and the benefits that they are going to receive from the outcome of working with us. The support, that their support system and the environment around them is not going to sabotage their actions, and that it's actually going to be a net positive on not just them, but anybody else that it could benefit. Okay, that's another one. And finally, the trust is that they feel safe enough to be open about their past experiences and their decision-making process moving forward based on those past decision-making processes. Okay, so those are the 6 beliefs we've got to make sure we're tackling, because at the end of the day, when we look at those 6 beliefs, and the more we study them, the more we can tie them back to specific objections, and the more we can identify that if these stones are left unturned, the only thing that we're doing is opening up ourselves or forcing ourselves to have to get good at handling objections. Which is, it's a benefit, right? I love handling objections. I'll be honest, there's sometimes that a sale feels much better for me when I do handle a few objections and I'm like, damn, I'm that guy, but at the end of the day, like if I can Happy Gilmore it, and instead of having to take all the extra, I'm shit at golf, by the way, so I probably know much about golf as you guys. I just know it's a funny movie. Like me hitting that long shot and just somehow getting it in a tiny hole miles away, like if that's easier than me having to do all the putting and all the shots in between, which is the objection handling, I'm going to do that every single time. So I'm going to make sure I uncover these stones during discovery, just to make sure that I don't feel like my job is fighting against objections. It's to just pre-answer them during discovery. Because worst case scenario, they still come up, but now we've immediately got those breadcrumbs, we've got those labels, we've got those verbal confirmations from the prospect that even though they're going to give us an objection, I have their words immediately right here to go, dude, don't make me bring up what you just said. And even if I do, it's just another strengthener because it came out their mouth and not ours. So the outcome of job number 2, to recap this for you guys, is before we reveal the price, ideally, before we've even began our pitch of how we're going to change somebody's life or how we're going to provide the outcome that they're coming to us for, is that they're emotionally and logically clear on exactly why this is the best move for them. That there's no doubt, there's no partner that's going to get in the way, there's no self-doubt, there's no limiting belief that I'm capable, there's no comparing you and lacking trust based on previous examples or previous nightmares. There's no doubt that you seeing this and living this outcome is going to have a fucking net positive impact on you and anybody around you. There needs to be those beliefs built before we pitch if we want to have the confidence that we can close this person without dealing with a shit ton of resistance towards the end. Okay, guys, like if genuinely, I believe if we nail those 2 jobs, the confirming that this person is a right fit and we're a right fit for them, and then we do our best to just uncover those stones and pre-handle objections before we close, that's where like closing doesn't become a skill set. It's just like quoting Johnny Mao here, it's just like the symptom of what it is that we're doing. Like it happens as a result. The same way I don't focus on closing to make money, I focus on closing to help people, because when I help them I make money anyway. I want to focus on doing these 2 jobs, because if I do these 2 jobs, that's where the sale comes from. not focusing on how can I sell this person, just confirm I can help them and help them pre-handle any possible objections they would have to this possible change before I pitch and before I let them know the price and what's actually at stake, you know, then that's when I'm drastically increasing the chance of me closing the deal without it feeling like I'm pressuring or selling somebody. How's everybody feeling about today's lesson? It was a long one. Jesus Christ. Beautiful.
I think
Seriously.
it was like really good.
Yeah, you liked it?
Yeah, actually I followed your advice after the call review, and I think I sold a 10K package, so I'm happy about that. But
Oh,
he still has to pay.
oh,
Um,
he's just paid, motherfucker. I mean,
yeah,
it would have been great news if he'd closed already. But
yeah.
what do you feel like? What do you feel like the biggest change was after the call review to then take into that call?
Well, one, the biggest difference was being a human, right? And then waiting until like doing a full discovery and then the the pitch, so that way it actually makes sense. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, all about contextualizing, making sure everybody's on the same page. And for
for
those of you
sure.
who don't have the context with Savonia, she sent me a call review, and a very like aware prospect. It's a B2B offer. Savonia's in an offer that helps people raise capital for their businesses. So like help find investors. They're basically the middleman between businesses and people with cash looking to make more cash by investing. And it was a very self-aware prospect. She definitely had a lot of active pain, a lot of active kind of problems there that I could just sense that she needed help with just from the way she was behaving. And the prospect mentioned something after a great question Savonia asked, but instead of digging deeper, Savonia just kind of went on to like pitch mode and like basically said, perfect, that's exactly why we have this, this, and this, and then started presenting the solution. And it would have made sense. It would have. But it's just like, if there was a way for me to take another 5 or so minutes to mirror emotionally, to probe and get people to dig deeper, to maybe label a couple of things as well, just imagine how much more the pitch would have made sense and how much more of like, I want you guys to visualize the light bulb moment. Like when you pitch, it should be like the prospects opening up the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, you know, like just a golden glow, like ding, that all makes sense. Like, oh my God, yes, this is exactly why I need you. And the only way that we can get there is when we expand to the degree that I kind of broke down in today's call by focusing on those beliefs. But I'm glad it worked. Let's get him closed. Elena, you haven't spoke too much, and I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself just once. How did you find today?
What was your question?
How did you find the call today?
Oh, your email.
No, not how did you find it? Like, how's
I
it
see.
been? Yeah,
That's
I know. I
awesome.
obviously sent it to you. You're all good. You're all good.
Sorry.
I promise you,
Well,
there's no such thing as silly stuff. I talk a bunch of fucking rubbish all the time, so you guys can make fools of yourself. It's totally fine.
yeah, it's awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Are you closing yet, or are you still looking for an offer?
No, I'm new, so I've never been on an offer, so I'm just learning.
Bless you. Bless you. That's totally fine. Well, this is a space to learn, and we will do plenty of that. There's going to be I do these calls every single Saturday. I'm also going to be adding a couple of calls during the week. This Saturday call is going to keep being completely free for anybody you guys want to invite. There's a community that I'm doing a 30-day free trial for you guys for. It's got all of my curriculum. It's like 2.5 hours worth of video content in there with everything that I've learned personally in like curriculum format. It's $97 a month. You get 2 weekly group calls, but don't take me up on the offer yet. Come to a few more of these Saturday sessions. We can do some role plays and stuff like that. And if it feels like a good jam, we can always talk about seeing what offers we can land you guys on. But guys, thank you very much for being just as boring as I am and having a great time on a Saturday, especially noon, a Saturday evening on our balcony, watching a sales training of all things. Elena, bless you. I appreciate you making it for the first time. I'd be absolutely blessed to see you on next week's call as well. And if either of you guys need anything from me, I know Nuna, you never hesitate to make a pest of yourself, which I like. Elena, if there's any questions or any doubts or just anything, if you watch the recording of this, you want me to expand on, please just drop me a DM or send me an email. It would be an absolute pleasure to help you out. Okay.
All right, thank you so much.
Guys, apologies for making it longer, but I will see you again this time next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take it easy.